Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigers.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fly Culture Podcast. Hey, you've just got me today. I thought as we're coming towards the end of the year, I'd take you through tackle I've been using and just have a little bit of a review of everything I've used. I should start by saying there's no product placement. It's just gear I've bought and I've used and I've liked, and I just really wanted to share with you more than anything else and say hopefully a few tips as well and say why I've liked something as well. So I thought we'd delve in straight away at the very end of the tippet and look at flies. And one of the really interesting things coming out of this podcast is I often ask, if you're a regular listener, you'll know this, but I often ask people, do you have many flies in your fly box? And the really interesting answer back to that seems to be no, a lot of the time. And I think what I've gleaned from this and personal experience as well is that a lot of it just comes down to really having a small selection of flies, but in a wide range of sizes, and then backing yourself and concentrating on that drift of the fly more than anything else, interpreting perhaps what's hatching, interpreting how the fish is rising, where it is in the hatch. Where's it eating in the hatch? Is it eating flies as they're just coming through and stuck in the surface film? Are the flies, if they're upwind flies, perhaps if they're duns, that they're sitting on the surface of the water? Or are they spinners that have come back down to the water again as well? So that to me means that we don't probably need a whole lot of fly patterns. And as a result, as I've talked many times on here before, that there's only a few patterns I rely on. I'm looking for a midge pattern, perhaps, something like even just classic patterns, that never really lose how effective they are. And something like a Griffiths gnat, for a caddis pattern as well, a CDC and elk seems to have worked really well for me. You'll know that I talk about the pearlbutt merger a lot. That works really well. It hasn't worked as well this year for me. I've caught fish on it, but not quite in the same way that I normally do. And there's also been situations where terrestrials have come into play, and I've used those a lot more. I promised myself I would, and I think they do probably make a bigger part of the food intake of trout and possibly grayling to a degree as well, than we actually think. So I've been using those a little bit more. Beetle patterns, ant patterns. I had an ant pattern that I may have talked about on here that I threw into a trout that was rising, that was in a really nasty, gnarly place. And this thing just absolutely smacked the fly and then took me into the snag that I knew it was going to take me into, and actually broke the hook as well. And that was an ant pattern. Beetles I've used a fair degree as well, and they've worked really well for me. So, and particularly one of the things I've always thought about as well is when the wind's blowing, and that's a good time for terrestrials to be blown onto the water as well. And then towards the back end, through summertime and through to back end as well, I'm looking for aphids as well, really small little patterns, and looking to fish those as well. And those over the years, that's probably actually, if I look back, I'm talking about fishing terrestrial patterns more regularly, but the aphid I think has probably been in my fly box for a very, very long time. But there have been situations this year I stayed off the water when obviously conditions weren't up for it, and I didn't feel it was right to actually fish for trout because there was no water and the water temperatures were too high. But when the trout came back on the feed a little bit more, I found them not as regularly rising as perhaps I might always do. So if I'd seen a rise or hadn't seen a lot going on, and very often I won't bother making a cast if I've not seen a fish rising, but because I'd had that sort of layoff due to the weather and the conditions and everything else, that I thought about bring them up patterns. And it was sort of, August, September time, back end of the season. And I came across some patterns from Fulling Mill, and it's a pattern called the Championship Caddis. And it's sort of kind of like a CDC and elk. with an orange butt on it, really. And I think that orange bit is the trigger point that we're probably looking for. But it worked really, really well for me. I could probably tie some of these up, and in the past I have with red butts as well. They work really, really well. And that's been a good pattern for me over the years. But like I've said on here before, that I've just not really been into fly tying, and I still can't get any real enthusiasm for it right now. So I thought, sorry, I'm going to buy some flies. And that one has been a good pattern for me. It caught me some sea trout as well, actually, that were rising. I kind of have learnt a little bit more over the years about how sea trout rise, and they have a particular way of rising, I think, anyway. And certainly when I'm on the river, I can tend to spot them. And I was throwing this pattern at them and catching them back end. And it was funny, I was on the river with my friend Luke Bannister, and again, it was back at the season. And we were talking about fly patterns, and I can't remember if I was fishing that or something else, but Luke said, I like, if there's nothing going on, a stimulator pattern, which is a great fly as well. And I started fishing one and caught some fish. He'd caught some as well. And then subsequently, when he'd gone home, I think I was down the next day and managed to catch a fish on a stimulator pattern, which I'm sure many of you know was designed, I think, for stonefly patterns in the US. I would suspect Pteronarcis hatch, those great big stones. And I know people had used them on stillwaters years back, but also have a place in smaller patterns. I've used them on the river as well over the years, and it was nice to sort of remember that coming back into play for me as well. So that was a good one. Also with a yellow body, I found it's worked for mayflies as well in those larger sizes, sort of size 8s has worked. So it's worth bearing in mind from that point of view. Also, mayfly time, I bought some more flies again from Fully Mill, and friend of the podcast and friend Paul Proctor had designed a range of mayfly patterns, and I wanted to try those out. And there's a wide range there that I bought, I don't know, 1 or 2 of each just to try them. And they work. It's hardly surprising, the maestro himself coming up with these, so there's a pretty good chance these flies are going to work. But they did really, really well. So I was really, really pleased with those. But yeah, I think the thing I'm getting is that you don't need a lot of flies. We often talk about travelling really, really light. And I do, and I have one fly box with some nymphs in. This time of year when I'm grayling fishing, I might have a grayling nymph box, but I'm not using a great deal of flies and concentrating on sizes more than anything else. Like I said at the very beginning, really thinking about the drift and having see what impact that has on things. So yeah, there's a couple of patterns. People often ask me about knots and things like that. Good old-fashioned tucked blood knot or improved clinch knot work really well for attaching flies. And there's a funny story that often when you're bone fishing, the guides like to tie on a loop knot, but I always remember that I was shooting at a permit and I said loop knot, and the guy said no, tucked blood. And I don't know if that was security or confidence or whatever else it is, but it seems to work really well for me. The only in a river situation, I think the only other time that I would change the knot would be if I was fishing a streamer and I'd be using one of those loop knots of some sort, whichever one works best for you. I think it's down to confidence, but I think those loop knots work and articulate the fly really, really well. So that's why I tend to go with those more than anything else. But moving on from there, tippet, and we're moving up towards the rod and everything else. But tippet Stroft has always been a mainstay for me, and I just happened to run out of it. And while I was buying the flies, I tried some of the and bought some of the Fully Mill Master Class copolymer. And that seems to be just fine. And I think a lot of these things, I also like the Rio Supple Flex as well, but I just don't have any at the moment. I don't use it. I think a lot of it with tippet is down to confidence. And, if you've had a fish break, or if you've sort of pulled on a knot, or something's happened, it feels a little bit brittle, or you lose a fish and it breaks in a strange place, then I think that confidence goes a little bit. And that's probably why we drift around. But I've been fishing a little bit heavier anyway. I've been catching smoke size fish, and I'm fishing 4-pound tippet. Has it made any impact on the fish I'm catching? It's made absolutely zero. So I'm perfectly happy using those various brands. But as I said, I've been trying some of these, and they've been really, really good. So I think that is worth mentioning. I also wanted to mention that fluorocarbon in light strengths I don't use. And it's not because I don't think it's any good or anything like that. It is simply because I don't want to lose a fly in a tree, or worse still, a fish, and it's not biodegradable. So that's the reason I don't use it. In heavier weights, yes, doesn't seem to be a problem. And I know the applications for still water fishing, again, where you're actually fishing heavier tippet diameters. So absolutely fine. But that's the only reason that I won't use that on the river. Little tip, it's not a new one, but if you're fishing droppers, if you're fishing a duo or a Euro nymph, this isn't particularly new, but you may not know it. And a really easy way to add a dropper is if you take your dropper of about, let's say about 5 inches, 4.5, 5 inches off your tippet spool, tie a loop in it, and then your main leader, if you make a loop in the leader and then just thread that loop from your dropper over it, and then thread the remaining part of that dropper through that loop, you'll have a lovely secure dropper. Now it will move up a bit, and I should mention that you want to be attaching that where you've joined 2 pieces of tippet together. And so what that will do, that knot on the tippet joint will join obviously those 2 pieces together, but it will stop that new dropper from actually sliding down too far. So it may slip a little bit higher, but it won't if you think about it, particularly if you've got a nymph on there, because the weight of the nymph's going to pull it down. But the other thing is that it's not joined to the main leader as such. So it will spin round and it's not going to twist as much. And as I said, I was shown it ages ago, and I really hadn't thought about using it. And then I happened to pick up Paul Gaskell's nymph fishing book, and I saw it in there, and it reminded me, and it works really, really well. So yeah, make a little kink sort of in your main leader. It'll be like if you imagine you're making sort of a closed U shape as such, and it is sort of a loop of some sort. Put the loop of your dropper over it, and then thread the rest of it through that loop, and you've got a really secure, nice joint. And it's really easy to change mid-river as well. So if you're going to change that dropper and that dropper's getting shorter and shorter and shorter, then it's easy to add a new piece. So it works really well. But remember, you want that not to wear 2 pieces of tippet of join. That'll hold everything in place. So like I say, I can't say that's anything new or it's my idea, but it's something I rediscovered, remembered, and it worked really well for me. Also, I was fishing with friend Steve Dowling on the river, and we were fishing. We just didn't want to really Euronymph. The conditions were pretty hard. The river wasn't very clear, but we fished a couple of nymphs and just cast the fly line. And instead of a stick-on indicator, he had some New Zealand wool. And I'd used this when it first came out, and I just couldn't get on with it for whatever reason that may be. I can't tell you. But I used Steve's wool, and it worked really, really well for me. It does. You've got to keep an eye on it and make sure that it doesn't slide too much. But I found that it didn't move a great deal. It moved a little bit, but as long as you're aware of it, and probably again another sort of join on the tippet may stop it going too far if you don't mind doing that sort of thing. But I found it really good, treated it with some gink, and it floated for a hell of a long time. I was fishing some relatively heavy nymphs, probably 7mm of tungsten in total and casting it, and it wasn't a problem at all. So I bought some of that as well and thought it was really, really good news. So I'm looking forward to using that again. So let's move up a little bit further. One of my favourite topics, of course, is fly lines and the importance of that fly line and how you get it to work. Fly lines are personal preference, and there are a wide range of price points if you're considering it. I just have been using, because I have so many really, the Rio fly lines, and on my Bannister 9.5 foot 4-weight, I used a technical trout, and I used a number of lines on there, and I couldn't quite get it to be where I wanted it to be, and then have settled on that, and it works fantastically for me. I know, because what I'm looking for as a river angler, I don't want to make 35 false casts to get the line out. I want to make minimal false casts. The rod and line are working in conjunction with each other really, really well, and get it out there, and so that it doesn't land with like a pile of spanners as well. But it was really interesting for me as well that, again, I talked on this same session I was on the river with Luke, that we were both fishing bamboo rods, and I tried, it doesn't sound the right sort of line, but it's another Rio line. It's the Creek line on my bamboo rod, and I was absolutely thrilled that Luke liked that setup as well. And again, I'd spent some time with all sorts of different lines. I thought, well, perhaps this one might work, this one. And then in a fishing situation, because I kind of test them in the garden and cast them a little bit at fishing ranges. And I think that's a really key thing to remember, is that don't pull all the line off the reel and cast it as far as you can. Think about things from a fishing standpoint and the distances that you'll fish. So I kind of try that in the garden, think, right, how does that feel? And sometimes with a new rod, I might go down to the river with a spare spool or a spare reel with a different line. I've sort of kind of made the choice in the garden, as it were. But sometimes when you tie a fly on, it doesn't always, and in a real fishing situation, it doesn't always feel quite the same. But this one has worked out really, really well for me. And it's the sort of, as I said, it's the Creek line, and it loads the rod incredibly quickly, but it's incredibly smooth. And although the head's relatively short, I found that I've been able to cast it a reasonable distance as well. So it's been really, really useful from that point of view. But I guess from this, as I've always said, really, find lines that work. There's so many good companies. There's so many lines that we can use for so many different applications, forms of fishing that we're actually doing. So, I kind of think about that in conjunction with the fishing I'm doing and the rod. But I'm lucky I've got a few lines, so I can string a few up and try them. But those ones have worked really, really well for me, and I've enjoyed my fishing as a result of it, I guess. So let's come on to rods now. A few things have changed, not a great deal really. Talking about Luke, and I've alluded to it, he built me a CTS on a CTS blank. They're a New Zealand company, and he built me a 9.5 foot 4-weight, and in graphite. It's a wonderful rod. I've used it in many, many places, and it's never let me down. I think it's super smooth, easy to fish with, feels comfortable. You might put the argument when you're in that length that 10 foot might be better, but I've often said on here that 10 foot to me as a river angler always feels just a little bit too long. It's psychological more than anything else. It's nothing more than that, but I feel happy with a 9 foot rod. Anything under 10 foot I feel a whole lot more comfortable with. But I also got from him a bamboo rod, and it was a 7'9" 4-weight. That's the one that I was fishing the Rio Creek on. It's a 3-piece rod, so my hope is that if I travel, that this one will fit in the case nice and easily, and I can take that. I've also really enjoyed using the Guideline 9'9" 3-weight, and that's a real, I think I could term that properly an all-rounder that I've cast a dry fly with, I've nymph fished with, and it does everything. And I've been looking for so long for a rod that will fit that brief, and that does it really, really well. And I fished that on the first day I fished in Italy, and it did great work. I really, really enjoyed fishing it. So I've enjoyed that one. For my nymph rod, my out and out nymph rod really is a 9.5 foot Solderini. And that's a great rod, it's what they do, and they are real fun rods to use. As I said, I've not really been doing a huge amount of nymph fishing, so I'm sure this is going to, with these cold conditions, it's going to come into play at some stage in the future, but we'll wait and see. But I'm still loving the Gatti. It's a 9'2" rod. I'd term it more of a dry fly rod more than anything else. It's a pleasure to fish with, super smooth. And you can probably see that I sort of search out really slightly different brands of equipment, and I kind of just like that aspect of it, that it's just a little bit different and they're fun to use. But a sleeper I found going over into salmon land really was an Orvis rod, and it's the Mission. It's a double hander, and it's a 13'7" weight, and it really is a nice rod to cast and fish with. I have one of the Rio Versi tip lines on there, and it casts absolutely beautifully. I really, really like it and enjoy fishing with it. And yeah, it's been a really pleasant surprise, that one. I've also got a glass double-handed rod, and it's a Vision one. It's called the Vision Glass double-hand rod. It's a 12'8" weight, and I've been fishing that a fair bit. And again, I think I fished the Versi tip on that as well. I've got an 8 weight, I think, or a 7/8, I think it is. And it works really, really well on there. And the reason I use it, I've not really said, I've touched on it a little bit, but friend of the magazine that sadly we lost just as it was being published, Ian May. I was at a fishing show and we were doing some demonstrations, and he put the rod in my hands and I cast it and absolutely loved it. I was really, really surprised. I thought it was going to be a noodle and hard to fish with and hard to cast, but it was absolutely fantastic. So I've got one of these, and I'm desperately trying to catch a salmon on it for my good friend Ian. It would be just wonderful to catch a fish and remember him that way. So I'm going to do my utmost with that. But it's really usable. And again, often we talk about rods and their ability to play fish, and looking at the rods I've described here, actually, just while I'm talking, none of them are stiff as a ball, none of them at all. They're all sort of mid-action rods and play the fish really well. So it's funny, I'm all subconsciously, I guess, choosing rods now, or consciously as well, I guess, in some cases, that are able to play the fish for me as well. So yeah, the glass rod, I thought, if I've got a salmon on there, wouldn't it be lovely to connect with a spring salmon and play it on a glass rod? It would be fascinating to see how that plays, and that would be, as I said, for my good friend Ian, it would be wonderful to do that, and I'm going to do everything in my power to try and make that happen as well. I've done a lot already, but yeah, I'm just not getting into salmon right now, but I'm going to give it a good go. Reels, I haven't got a lot to report really. I managed to score a second-hand Lamson LA reel, and I've admired these for so many years. I absolutely love them. I think they're beautiful. And I happened to find one of those that had barely been used, was in great condition. I thought, what the hell? And bought it. And it sits on the Bannister CTS rod and works fantastically. I hooked a nice fish. I'm trying to think where it was now. I think it was on the Avon with Warren, actually. And I hooked, it was like the second but last day to the end of the trout season there. And I hooked a fish there and it ripped line off the reel. And some people, I think, may feel that they look just a little bit too dainty, just pretty more than anything else. But it's not, it's hard as nails. And yeah, it was quite a cool feeling having some line ripped off the reel and it doing the job. But I really, really do like it. It makes me smile every time I look at it, and yeah, I'm really pleased I managed to find one at long last. So I thought we could move on to waders now, and this is such a difficult one to talk about. I've looked at this so many ways over the years. I've talked about it on here so many ways as well, And it's really, really difficult. And when I was guiding and I guess wasn't looking after kit in quite the same way, I was sort of going down the cheaper disposable route for waders and thinking, right, well, I'll probably get a season out of them. And it's like, I guess you could say, a business expense in some respects that you know that they're not going to last a great deal. So that's absolutely fine. Versus expensive and seeing, am I going to get bang for buck? And I've been wearing the Orvis Pro Zippers. I love them because they got a zip on them. And certainly this time of year, again, if I've been waiting for a while, the zip makes life so much easier for me. They've got built-in knee pads as well. I'm not one of these people who's scrabbling around on the river, crouching down. I've never needed to do it. There's probably the odd occasion where I've needed to do it, but not in any great way. But when I'm getting under fences and stuff, my knees aren't quite as good as they used to be, and I can just use those and there's no pain in the knees as well. But I've used those, I think now, well over, I think I must be getting up for 2 seasons now, and no signs of any issues whatsoever. And I'm embarrassed to admit this, but mine sort of get hung out in the garage after a day's fishing, and that's about it. I've got them inside at the moment now that it's cold and miserable and everything else, but I don't do anything special to look after them. But I've been surprised, really pleasantly surprised, how they're holding up at the moment. And I do, the rivers I fish, there's a lot of brambles, there's a lot of stuff that you could probably do some damage on them. I don't know if it's because the lower level of the waders is actually 5 layers. I don't know if that's going to make any impact whatsoever, but it seems to work pretty well for me. And so far, if I could get 3 seasons out of them, and I'm in them a lot, I do wear, and I fish, I'm very, very lucky, I fish a lot. And so if I could get 3 seasons of hardware out of them, I reckon that's probably net going to be about the same. So that's how I'm trying to rationalise it. That's how I'm trying to make it work and say, right, okay, even I could probably think about storing them a little bit better or whatever, but I want to try and use them in the same way that I use the other ones, the cheaper ones. You might think disposable or more disposable that I'm going to go through really quickly, but these seem to be holding up really, really well at the moment. So I'm really pleased so far with those. And like I say, this time of year, particularly a zip is an absolute dream. So I'm really, really happy about that. So wading boots, and I wanted some real lightweight ones, and I found the Sims Flyweight wading boots, which are really, as the name suggests, light. I couldn't tell you the weight off the top of my head, but I know they're really comfortable to wear. They're really light. I bought them from, they were difficult to get hold of for a while. They're not super expensive when you look at them comparable to wading boots generally, but I bought them from Farlow's because they were hard to find, and they came in, and Tom let me know they were in, and he even fitted some studs to them as well. But I think they're really like trainers when I'm wearing them. And I remember, again, talking of Italy, that I remember hopping over rocks without any issues whatsoever. And I'm a season into wearing those, and I'm really, really pleased with how they're performing at the moment. They're a little tiny bit scuffed, but I'm just not, I don't care about how pretty everything looks. I want something that's going to work and is comfortable to wear, and I can walk a bit of a distance in them. And they seem to be doing the job really well. The grip with the studs, they're just standard tungsten studs that Tom put in for me. Thank you, Tom. And they seem to do the job fantastically well. And I've been really, really pleased with those. People often ask me actually about wading boots and sizes as well. And I generally, for me, I just go up one size, and that seems to work pretty well for me. I did go up one time a few years back now, because I sort of had a winter pair of waders as well. And I know I put many layers of socks in there, and I had a bigger, slightly bigger pair of wading boots, and I went up a size and a half, possibly 2. And I wore the back of the neoprene sock of the waders. They were stocking foot waders, obviously. And because it wasn't tight against the back of the wading boot, that I wore a hole in the waders. So go too big and you've got the risk of that happening. But I find generally a size up works really, really well for me. People also talk about the soles coming off and stuff like that, and I have had them come off. But I don't know if it, again, because I'm fishing a lot, that the wading boots generally don't dry out. And I don't know if it is going from wet to dry from long periods in between that causes that. It's not said with any knowledge whatsoever. It's just a observation. And it seems to me that I don't have too many issues on that front. So maybe that, maybe not. It may even be worth, if you've not worn your wading boots for a bit, just giving them a little bit of a soak with the hose or whatever, and try and see if that works as well. But I've not had big issues with that personally, but might be the reason, it might not, but I thought I'd mention it. So talking of treats, I talked about the ULA reel that was a treat. My next one was a net, and it was from Roger Taylor at Eden Made. I've had him on the podcast. I've got to know him. He's a really good guy. And eventually, it's taken quite some time, and I pulled the trigger and ordered one. And it turned up, and he very kindly as well put a Fly Culture, the fish from the Fly Culture logo on the net as well, and talked to me about the wood. It's kind of like ordering a bamboo rod, actually, in some respects. That he talked to me about the wood and how I'd like it, and he found a beautiful piece of burr elm, so it's beautifully marked, the net, and it's absolutely stunning. I've not had it long. I've probably had it a week and a half, something like that. I've not had the chance to go fishing for obvious reasons with the weather and everything else, but I'm really, really thrilled with it. I need to christen it. My observations of it would be that it's incredibly tactile, sits in the hands, ergonomic, sits in the hand really, really well, and it is beautiful as well. I've used some wooden nets in the past and found them a little bit heavy, but I've sort of put this on my fishing vest and been really, really pleasantly surprised that it doesn't feel in the slightest bit heavy as well. So, yeah, I'm really pleased. I cannot wait to put that to the test as well. So looking forward to that one very, very much. Vest, I'm nothing to report. I've been using a Patagonia one. Can't even remember what it's called, but it's a light one. I had it on the podcast when I did back a little while, 2 or 3 years ago, with Nick Hart, and I mentioned the vest, and I've still got that one, and I can fit 2 okay size fly boxes in there should I want them. It's when I was in Italy, actually, I took a water pack thing, a bladder, and it fitted in the back of the vest along with a rain jacket should I need it, and all those other bits and pieces as well. And that's worked really, really well for me. I think it was well under £100, but it's lasted really fantastically well. I lost the fly patch off it and found one, so I'm happy about that as well. So that's been good news. But again, it goes to the travelling light, really. And I'd probably go for a lanyard if I didn't need to carry the other stuff. But it's nice having that. I can put a bottle of water in, or I can put a sandwich in, or I can put a jacket in. And that's not a problem at all from that point of view. So it works fantastically well from that point of view. Outerwear, as I'm talking about jackets, really, it's hard for me to look beyond Dryology. Steve, again, has been a guest on the podcast. The rain jacket we talked about works fantastically well, repels the water really well. It's really well designed. I like that you can fold the hood away should you want to do it as well. I like the hand warmers, particularly this time of year or early season. And when your hands get wet, you can actually pull the hand warmers out of the pockets so that they can dry off as well, which is a great advantage. Lots of room in there, really well thought out and designed, and really well engineered from that point of view as well. So really, really happy with that one. He also does I think it's called a euthermic Primaloft jacket. Jesus, this thing keeps you warm. And up until recently, I was just walking with that on and a T-shirt when the cold weather first came, and was absolutely fine. And even now, I've just got a really thin jumper, really, really thin one, and T-shirt and this jacket, and it keeps you really seriously warm. And yeah, I like that one a lot. I like that also the hood. The hood is really comfortable, pulls right down. If you're wearing a cap as well, it works nicely with that. It's adjustable, the hood as well. But I've been absolute toast. And it's a local company, friend, good stuff as well, well thought out. I know Steve well, and, he just doesn't do stuff. If he's going to do it, he's going to do it properly. And I've been really, really pleased with that. I'm talking about caps there and things. I have to admit that I noticed, I think it was this year, that I had just this little patch of dry skin on the tip of my ear. And I put this on my personal Facebook, actually, and said, I think I listed it under things I have learned. And it was, I was worried that, fishing a lot, and when I was taking people fishing as well, that I probably was I know I was putting suntan lotion on, but as the day went on, perhaps that wasn't working as well. And so I decided, right, I'm not going to take any more risks. And I had a bucket hat I bought from Patagonia, and that covered my ears, and the thing went away straight away. And I hope that is a little bit of a note. So always keep a checkout. Make sure you put plenty of sunscreen on. And even if you're going to wear a baseball cap, perhaps it might be worth having a small pot of sunscreen that you can put on as the day goes on. But I've noticed the difference, and it has been quite noticeable. And I've been really, really pleased with how that's actually turned out. So I don't know what's going to happen with bucket hats. It's a trend sort of thing. I suppose they're going to go in and out of fashion, but I'm going to stick with mine at the moment. I kind of like it, and it's done the job, and it's saved me from worrying about my ears and everything else. So yeah, if you're having those issues, it might be worth looking and thinking about perhaps something just a little bit different. Wintertime, I probably will wear my baseball cap, because the grayling this year, I've been wearing a beanie. So that's been covering the tips of my ears as well. So I've decided I'm not going to take or put myself in any real positions where it's going to be difficult. So, and putting my ears in direct sunlight. So I've decided that's the way that I'm going to go with that, and we'll see how that one plays out. Sunglasses as well. One of the frustrations I've had, it's a bit like fishing rods really, is that trying to find a true all-rounder pair. And I'd love to say that rose-tinted glasses would be best. But, I was wearing, I think it was brown lenses. For years and years and years. And in most situations, absolutely fine. Never had an issue whatsoever. They've been absolutely fantastic. Never, ever let me down. But it's when you've got those little extremes or a very cloudy day, then it becomes a little bit more problematic. So I thought, what about photochromic? And I think Zoorvis did a pair of photochromic glasses years and years and years ago that I had. And I did a little bit of research, and I had a look on Amazon, and I found some there, and they were about 15 quid, something like that. And I tried them for a bit, and they seemed to work really well. I could spot the fish well. There are friends of mine who spot fish much better than I, but I think I'm pretty good at spotting fish. Didn't seem to impact that in any real way. Used them for probably 3 or 4 months and liked them. But for a 15 quid pair of glasses, they're not always the most comfortable. So when I decided I was going down the photochromic route, finding photochromic polarized glasses by main brands is really, really difficult. I really struggled, but I found some from Serengeti and bought those. Much more comfortable. I think the lens is probably significantly better. I kind of like them. You'll see them on some of my personal posts. There is a hint of Bruce Willis in his rock star era look, but I kind of like them that they're a little bit. I always like anything that looks a little bit different. So wraparound, I understand why we want to wear wraparound glasses, but I kind of like these, and I've been really, really pleased with them. And it opens up the river, so it doesn't mean I never like fishing without glasses on in any way, shape or form. And sometimes when you're on the river really, really late, there is a temptation to actually do that. So these have worked really well for me. Really, really pleased with that. So I think in essence that has been my season from a tackle point of view. The fishing season, like many others, and we always talk about, has been a challenging one. My local river has not returned, hardly surprisingly, many salmon. The trout fishing was good, really good, a bit shitty, and then okay. I would describe it probably as if we looked across the 6 months of the season. I've not done a huge amount of grayling fishing. I think it's probably the weather that had a big impact, all that rain that came. And now we're in this big chill, and getting out and about has been problematic. But I'm looking forward to the next one, obviously, as we all do. And, I'm sure there'll be something that rears its head that I think, that might be a nice addition. But I've almost got my tackle from a rod point of view where I want it. The lines that I'm throwing on the rods, I'm really, really happy with. So that works. I don't need a lot of flies. So I'm in good shape there. So there's probably not a great deal that I need. And I do find myself looking at old classic rods that I've either owned or lost or sold or passed on or whatever. And I think, that might be nice. And we'll see. I'll probably keep an eye out on that a little bit, but we'll see how that one plays out. But that's about it, I think. And I'm recording this podcast on the 15th of December. So this will probably be my last one. We'll pick up again in January. But I wanted to say a really massive thank you for listening to this. I really, really enjoy recording them. I really have enjoyed talking to all of the guests and finding out about their stories, their lives, and they love fishing just like we do. And that's been fantastic fun. Thank you for writing. I get so many messages from people, and as you know, I always reply to them, and it means the world to me when people say that they've enjoyed these, and I really enjoy recording them for you, and I'll continue to do those. There will never be a charge for this, ever. I just love talking about fishing, and it's fantastic fun. Thank you to everyone who supported the magazine as well. It's been a fantastic year for us, and the brand of Fly Culture seems to have grown a little bit more. It's been challenging from a running a magazine point of view because of the paper costs, but we've ridden this out, and I hope that we might start to see those. It's very difficult for prices to come back down again, but it has been really, really great fun. And it's, as I said, when this is being recorded, that the magazines are starting to appear with readers now, and it's always a wonderful time that I keep my fingers really tightly crossed that everyone will enjoy it. And I sit down when it's delivered and read it as a reader myself as well, and see how I feel about it. And I still love doing that. We'll be coming up 5 years next year, which has been great fun. I absolutely love it. Thank you for supporting. Thank you to all of our contributors as well. You've been absolutely fantastic, and it's been an absolute pleasure to find new writers, photographers, artists, whoever that may be. And I do everything in my power to support creative people. And I'll always say this and continue to say it, that if you are a creative person, I'll always support you. And because I'm charging people money for Fly Culture, I will pay you. I'll always pay you. Please, please, please don't give your work away for free if somebody's charging for a product. And that's how I have always felt about it, and I will continue to. So yeah, I think that's about it, really. I don't know there's anything else to add. That's my thank yous, my end of season speech, I guess, but thank you for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. There's going to, of course, be many more very, very soon. Let me know if there's anyone you think I should be talking to. People do. And somebody sent me a list this morning of places they'd like to learn about. And I'm very happy to be able to tick a few of those off the list for him as well, that they're coming, Casper, so it won't be very, very long now. But I hope you've enjoyed this one. It's a little bit different. As I said, I've not been paid, I've not had product placement or anything. It's just stuff I like. And again, it's about supporting creatives. I want to try and support our industry as best as I possibly can as well. And it's just a chance for me to say, look, I've used this stuff. I think it's really, really good. So thank you again for listening to this episode of the Fly Culture podcast. And if you've enjoyed it, please consider subscribing, and perhaps you might even consider leaving a little review. I'm told that allows people to find us, and it'd be really cool if we can spread the fly fishing word with people. But thanks so much for listening.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.